atomic bomb post, and it's like, oh, she like, you know, you could take like 2 months off and then like come back and just like pick it up. Yeah.
Boom.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't lose as much as I thought I was going to lose. So
yeah, that's comforting, right?
It was well worth it for sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
So Mike, thank you for giving up probably about what will be anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes on this gorgeous Saturday afternoon. Really, you've seen most of them, you know, most of us. We're going to roll right into the show. Just to give you a little bit of a preview, you know, we're going to be talking about UnLearn, so breaking bad habits with a purpose. And the format is each of the co-hosts gets kind of carte blanche to basically ask you a question or a few questions if they uncover something that's of real interest. So each of us is going to get a chance to ask you something, and then we'll wrap it, you know, as we start to wrap it up towards the end. We'd love to give our guests the opportunity, if they choose to do so, to ask one or all of us something, and it could be anything if you choose. So does that sound okay with you?
Sounds good.
Awesome. So do we have to call you Dr. Mike? I mean, I know you're a doctor, but
I mean, you guys can, you know, so the answer is no.
He earned it. Come on.
Yeah, you can call me whatever you like. I mean, some people like Katie Wallace say Dr. Mike with everything.
Always.
Other people like probably use other words that you won't stay on here, because I'm sure Om will be editing the video, right?
Oh, well, I'm going to tell you, Om hears it in different languages. Thank you. So look, first of all, we got Dr. Eminem, right? Dr. Mike Morgan on the UnLearn Show. All of the co-hosts are absolutely thrilled to see him doing his virtual reality shot back there for us. It's even went around. Welcome to the UnLearn Show. Introduce yourself just so the audience knows a little bit about you, and then our co-hosts are just going to leap right into it and put the thumb screws to you, Mike.
I'm Dr. Mike Morgan. Many of you probably have seen me on LinkedIn. I kind of, like many of you, started creating video content here several months ago when they introduced the video capability. And since then, I've kind of just run the gamut of just, you know, filming and recording a bunch of different types of video, just kind of doing a bunch of testing and using it as a creative platform to kind of provide me that creative place just to kind of showcase my thoughts and ideas.
I'm going to jump into it because I feel like I know you pretty well at this point. So you do a lot. I mean, you know, like when I first found out about you, like connecting humans, and you're like a serial entrepreneur, and you're you have your doctorate. You probably have like 15 million businesses that you're working on right now. Like, what is why? Like, what's the underlying reason why you do everything that you do?
That's a really good question. You know, my father was a union pipe fitter in Boston, and he, you know, worked manual labor, you know, like during the day, and then he would come home, and like on the weekends, he always had a project going on, or he was always kind of going to do some moonlight plumbing for friends and families and such. And I think just his work ethic. My mother was a second grade teacher, and later in her career went back to school, raising a family, working. So I just think it's the work ethic that they provided us. I started working at like 13, and I never looked back. And it's interesting because recently one of my mentors was like, you know, focus focus on one thing and like push all of your power and energy behind it. And what I've learned throughout the years is that as a serial entrepreneur is that when you do that, there's a lot of other factors that are working with you and working against you as an entrepreneur. And some things are just, you can't control, like they're out of your hand, really. And so when you push everything into one thing, you really increase the risk of failure. So if you diversify a bit, it's like investments. If you diversify a bit and just kind of push a bunch of different things out there and see what sticks, then you can hook onto that and then drive that forward. So even like when I was in my doctoral program, you know, I was working on one specific thing, like in the field of nanotechnology, and even within that, like so wicked specific, like I was working on 3 or 4 projects and my mind just got trained to work that way. It allows me like the creativity where if one project, every project has an ebb and flow. And so when one is going slow, you can kind of put emphasis on another. And then when that slows down, you can go back and put emphasis on something else. And if you create a diverse portfolio, then each one gives you kind of that creative outlet that you're looking for. So that's kind of my approach. Who knows whether it's worked or not before? Like, I'm not a millionaire or a billionaire. So one could argue that that's maybe not a great approach, but I think at the end of the day, it's what makes me happy.
I know you don't half-ass anything. So like, how is that, how do you sustain doing all that?
Well, coffee like is probably
Yerba mate?
I was just telling somebody the other day, like, I'm like, do you see that coffee pot in my kitchen right there? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, that is like my lifeblood. Like, I love coffee. I love unsweetened iced tea. I think the other thing is just, I just really love what I do. You know what I mean? Like, I just love to work. Like, I work every single day. I work many hours in a day. Sometimes it's really hard for me to unplug. Like, I don't really take a lot of vacations and get out, but I just really prefer to work. And in terms of my energy, like, I don't know, looking at my son, he's full of energy. And so when I look at him, I think to myself, okay, he probably gets that from me, but I don't look at myself as being a super energetic person, maybe just because I'm pretty laid back. But I guess it's just like my desire to win is what drives me to keep working every single day, right?
So you're saying, I've heard you mention a couple times, like, you know, diversify so you don't, you know, you kind of counteract those times when you fail, or you like to win, which makes sense. I could see that in you. What do you think is your biggest failure in your career?
I would say my last entrepreneurial endeavor was probably the biggest and most disappointing failure. I started a company with someone, and we initially got a lot of great traction. Like, we bootstrapped it. I basically built a team of like 12 people with like just on the concept of sweat equity and no money exchange, and getting people like charged up about being part of this business and taking ownership of the business and being a part of the business. And it was a really cool product. It was essentially I would say, okay, someone muted me there. It was essentially like a refrigerator type device that would grow like fresh food and fresh produce and herbs and all these different types of like plants and vegetation in a hydroponic, aeroponic environment. And it got so much traction. It was in Forbes and Food and Wine and Business Insider. And my co-founder at the time just threw a huge wrench into the overall business, which kind of created a situation where it couldn't move forward. And it was just heartbreaking. I mean, 2 years to try to just mentally like get over that hurdle. I mean, at the time, Shark Tank had called us. Like, we didn't call them, like they called us.
Wow.
I was talking with a big appliance manufacturer at the time, that their venture capital arm, and the guy that I was talking to was basically like, this is when Pokemon Go came out, and he was like, this is better than Pokemon Go. And I was like hashtag mind blown. I knew like all indicators were just firing like green. And this was my ticket to like success, to the first mega win. And it just didn't end up working out that way. And that was my biggest failure as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a businessman. I realized at that time that there's some things you just can't control. There's other things that you can control. And now looking back at it, there are mistakes that I made that I don't want to say never make again, but I would reduce the risk by implementing different measures. Yeah, there was just, I mean, you can probably just tell today it's still like, is like a little bit of a friction point for me. But with that being said, I kind of feel like at now I'm working on a few projects with a few different teams, and I think there's some good green indicators going on. It's just a matter of like executing on these projects, really, essentially.
So, Mike, what would you say is your definition of success? Because you said you haven't hit that big mega success yet, and you've got all these projects going, and you're working hard to, I'm the same way. I love to work. It's just there's some sort of like energy, that just is in it. And when you as you pour in, you get to see stuff come out. It's just really cool. So what is energy? The energy involved part of what is built into that success feel for you? But like what does that look like for you? When will you make it?
I think, so I've had like two major goals in my life as a human being, as a professional. Like the first one I achieved, which was in about 7th grade, my science teacher was like, we were trying to, at that time, like we had an opportunity to go in 8th grade, go to the high school, partake in a kind of like honor science program. And I asked my science teacher at the time, and he was just like, I don't think you're going to be a good scientist. And so I went home and I talked to my mom and dad about it, and they could write a waiver to waive his decision. And so they did. I mean, they talked to me about it, like, do you think you can handle it? And then of course, like, here's your teacher saying, I don't think you're going to be good at it. It introduces self-doubt, and, your confidence goes down. You're like in 7th grade, you know what I mean? So I just at that time was like, I just am not going to take that as an answer. And I think at that time I decided, like, not only was I going to go and do the course, but my love and passion for science was going to drive me to that ultimate goal. And as I kind of worked and achieved like each little milestone, my major milestone became my desire to get a doctoral degree in a scientific field. So I achieved that. And then at that point, my advisor at the time, we were doing this was like when Eminem came out with 8 Mile, and I saw an opportunity and I was like, let's throw some like big MC battles in DC. And so we started doing that, and we'd get like 30 or 40 MCs to come in there, and we get guys like producing beats in the background and DJs like spinning instrumental tracks, and these MCs would come in there in a round robin type of environment. They'd like battle it out. We'd get like clothing sponsors. Many of them that like back then were starting out, and now they're like major brands on the East and West Coast. And I just had this passion for like entrepreneurship. Like it was just, there was everything about it. I was like, man, this is just what I want to do. But my advisor found out about it. And he came to me and he said, look, you have 2 options. Either one, you quit your doctoral degree, like you just quit and walk away and like get out. Or 2, you quit the MC stuff and do your doctoral degree full time. And so he was like, you have those 2 options. And at the time I had gotten 3 years in, and I was like, well, it's kind of a no-brainer to me. I'm going to finish what I started. But it set like this fire in me, like this desire. So my second life goal professionally is to take a concept that I've created in my mind and bring it all the way to like starting a company, getting it funded through investment, and then selling it. And so that would be like the first exit, and that would be like achieving the next goal in my career. So that's what I'm like 100% focused on from a professional standpoint right now.
That's so cool to start something that you've just been thinking about forever and see it come to fruition. For all the entrepreneurs, you know, that are thinking about starting something, what do you suggest for them to do just to get started, to get moving with it?
Right. You know, in my career as an entrepreneur, I remember writing a business plan, right? And it took me like 6 months to write this thing, like strategy, like this massive like financial model that a friend of mine, him and I created this financial model. He's got an MBA. He's like a financial genius, like a wizard. And, you know, 6 or 7 different spreadsheets linked together and modeling 3 and 5 year growth and all this stuff. It was insane. The actual business plan, like when I went to my advisors, like they were like, this is like fantastic. Like it's one of the best business plans I've ever read. So I go to the investor and I slide this thing across, and it says business plan on the front, and I slide it across, and he's like, what is this? And I'm like, well, it's a business plan. And he goes, oh, I don't read business plans. Show me what you actually have accomplished. Like, show me what you actually have done. And at that point, like I spent 6 months, like accomplishing this beautifully architected and written business plan, and, you know, semicolons and colons and pronouns and prepositions and adjectives all placed beautifully. And it was a complete waste, you know? And I said to myself, like, I will never write an effing business plan ever again. And so I tell this story because it's a very valuable lesson for me as an entrepreneur, and something that other entrepreneurs should hear. It all comes down to execution. So if you're an entrepreneur and you have an idea, the first thing that you have to think about is, how do I show someone what my idea is? And then, like, not just telling them, oh, I have this great idea, because everybody has great ideas. Only a few people can take an idea and translate it into actually something that they can show somebody. Like, this is my idea, and this is what I've done to develop this idea. And so the beautiful thing about technology is these days, whether you're building physical products and digital products, and I'm actually building both, is that with physical products, you can rapidly prototype things very inexpensively. So you can have an idea, you can find somebody who can actually design that idea. Like, you could even go on Fiverr and find a CAD developer and have them design it inexpensively. And then you can send it to a company up in New York City, like Voodoo Manufacturing, and send them the file, and they'll print it out to you and mail it to you in the mail. So then when you're like, hey, I have this idea and I have a prototype of it, people are like, oh, this guy's, he's legit. It's a starting point. On digital products, it's the same thing. Show somebody like, you know, something that you've just literally hacked together. It has to have, like, it can have minimal design, minimal functionality. I mean, some of you folks have seen the alpha version of Candio and have participated in using that. Like, that is like, had minimal design, minimal functionality, but, you know, you saw kind of where I was going with it. And so I can tell you, hey, this is what I'm building, and I can show you this is what I'm building. So that's the first step. I have an idea. How do I actually develop something that's like visual for a digital product or tangible for a physical product that gives me and you, as somebody who's interested in it or potentially interested, the notion that I've actually been able to execute.
What was your first job? Like, how did you get started in all of this?
I was like, my first job was, I was a caddy, like at a golf course.
Nice.
for like all these rich people. Like, I was 13 and I would get on my bike at like 5 in the morning and I would pedal like 3.5 miles to the golf course, and I'd like carry some rich guy's bag for like 4 hours. He'd give me like $12, buy me a Snickers bar and a Sprite, and then I'd get on my bike and pedal back home. But that was like my first job. And then like, and then I worked at a golf course, like as a greenskeeper, and then we worked construction, and I worked as a caterer. I mean, I kind of done a lot of different types of things, you know.
So Mike, you talk a lot in the very beginning about diversifying, which clearly your experience, you've just showcased it in just the last 30 seconds and the last 10 minutes. But you also talk about, I think you said your second goal as a human being, right, is to create that idea, bring it to life, and then execute upon it and show it. So the question is going to tie back to unlearn. It is the UnLearn Show. What do you think you need to unlearn to make that second goal happen?
It's like such a great question, right? I think one of the things that I learned from the last business is that when you build a team, you have to build it with like absolute monsters, like beasts, where you don't need to like hold their hand in any fashion. You don't need to give them like, you give them minimal input and they give you maximum output. And with the last company I kind of built a team with, I realized I had gotten a bunch of really expert people, but they weren't like well briefed in the startup entrepreneurial world, right? Like, you can be an expert in a corporate environment and really succeed in that situation. But the minute you put somebody into a startup environment, like, they don't know what to do. And I would say when that happens, you kind of have to be the puppeteer, like you're kind of like puppeteering a bunch of stuff. And inevitably when you do that, human nature is some people are like, okay, he's maybe managing a bit, or kind of too involved in these particular areas. And that can lead to a lot of like miscommunication, misunderstanding, misperception. So I think the thing that I wanted to unlearn for this business was, for this project, was like stepping back and saying like, you guys and gals, like you do what you need to do. Like, here's the overarching like umbrella, just go and execute and get out of the way. And so even with the team that I'm working with now, like they'll like be working on something. And see, innately, I'm just like, in nanotechnology, you're working, like take a human hair and you split it 80,000 times down the center, and then that's the size of 1 nanometer. So when you talk about like granularity and you talk about like attention to detail and everything, in order to make those projects work, to make that science work, you have to be like way, way, way down in the weeds. And so my mind is trained like that. And so I have to pull myself back, way back, and be able to say, okay, I can't understand everything about, you know, coding and all these different aspects of the technical side of the house. So I have to step back and say, you know what, let me get out of you guys' way, because if I start to get in this the way my mind works, I'm going to get too granular. It's going to slow you guys down. So let me just step back. And that's what I've found myself doing. The difference between the last business and this business is like, let me just get out of the way. Let me just get out of the way. You guys need to do what you guys need to do. And if I start getting in there and asking all these questions, like, how does blockchain work? Like, how does smart contracts work? Like, I'm like, my one team member gave like what was supposed to be a 45-minute overview of blockchain technology. By the time we were done, it was like 1 hour and 45 minutes, because I was asking him all these very specific questions, like, oh, wait, how does this work? How does this work? You can't learn and understand everything. And if you try to, you're going to get bogged down. So get out of your way, get out of your own way, get out of your team's way, let them do what they want to do. And everybody's going to be very like happy. There's going to be like minimal friction, or you're going to empower everybody. And that's probably the biggest thing I've learned through the serial entrepreneurship.
I have a follow-up to that before opening it up for everybody to kind of get a couple of last thoughts and comments in there. You're clearly highly educated, and you know, my wife is also in a similar situation from a strictly an education standpoint. And sometimes you hear paralysis by analysis, where you just overthink things because, and not just strictly tied to education, but because you're just a highly functioning individual. So you talked about fear of failure.
Who's going to take a drink of a beer right now?
Yeah, you might need it for this question. So fear of failure, right? And you talked about this, saying, well, you know, you have diversified and you do multiple projects because of that fear of failure. What is it going to take for you to get past that fear of failure to create and implement that second goal and bring your idea to life? You specifically, not a team, not anybody else, you specifically.
I think, you know, like, I think the mindset that wins is that you can't, like, you're a human being, so you're afraid of failing, right? But you have to literally remove that. Like, you have to remove that notion. You have to understand in the back of your mind that, like I said, no matter what you do, sometimes you just lose, right? Like, there's so many factors in life and in business. Like, sometimes no matter what you do, you're just going to lose. And as long as you understand that and accept that, then you can push forward as hard and as vigorous as possible. I think for me, when I was a child, I was afraid of a lot of things. Like, I couldn't even sleep over a friend's house because I was so nervous. In graduate school, I was having anxiety. The doctor was like, you have an ulcer, like, it's because of nerves. And I made a conscious decision at that point in my life to stop, like, giving a shit, like, about about failure, about, like, what people think of me. Having the freedom to do that is, like, allow me to propel forward. Even like I'm designing an experiment now on LinkedIn, and I was actually kind of thinking to myself yesterday, like, what happens if this fails? And I had to like quickly remind myself, like, if it fails, then I can at least get up there and tell everybody like what I was trying to intend to do, and that it failed, and then move in a different direction. So I feel like I'm not afraid of anything right now. Like I don't fear death. I don't fear man or woman. I don't fear failure. So I just feel like it's that recognition that you can fail, and if you accept it, like you can just get up, brush your shoulders off, and like get back to it. And I think that's the most like telling thing about an entrepreneur is when they tell you about the battle scars that they've endured. And when people laugh about it, like, you know, like that dude is a seasoned, like entrepreneurial combat veteran. Like he, you know, he's been through it a bunch of different times, and, you know, he's got scars to show it, but he's sitting there like, you can almost think back to World War I or World War II, where he's, you know, smoking a Marlboro and he's drinking a beer, and he's like, yeah, remember that time I got shot at? And he shows you his, you know, his big bullet wound here, and all his buddies sit around, they laugh because it's funny. It's like, yeah, well, I got a big scar on this side of my head, you know. And so those men fear nothing. They have already been through it. And I think as entrepreneurs and as individuals, like, we're naturally, you know, fearing people, but you have to like just, you know, let it ride. Like you have to get over that, get over yourself. And that's kind of my 2 cents on fear. And what makes it even more beautiful about LinkedIn is like, and what empowers me even more is that now I can fail in front of like thousands of people, right? And it's like when you put yourself out there like that, and you're willing to fail in front of your friends and colleagues and all these really smart, professional, and successful people, like that removes even more fear from your everyday life, you know. I'm willing to push the envelope until like it breaks in half, and then somebody lights it on fire, and, you know, like you have to be willing to just like crush it. And if people laugh at you or say he's an idiot, like, I don't care. Like, say whatever you want. Just make sure that if you say it, like, say it to my face, you know, because, you know, I fear no man.